going to dive into our first panel of the day where we're going to talk about upgrading DIY with the pros. Thanks to all of you for joining me today. Let's start with you, Chris. Can you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what you do?
Sure. So really thankful for being here today. Thanks to the rAVe agency for inviting me. My name is Chris Orm. Chris Orm's the name. Smart home is the game. I'm a smart home professional here in Las Vegas. I am the service manager at a company called Eagle Century. They're the largest integrator here in town, and we do multi-million dollar homes in the high-end luxury community here in Las Vegas. So that's a little bit about me, and we'll pass it along.
Yeah, Lee, what about you?
Hey, thanks for having me. I love working with rAVe. It's been a pleasure all these years. So my name is Lee Distad. I am the Alberta Territory Manager for a distributor company called Hitfire here in Canada. We used to be a telecom company, but since COVID, our brand assortment has expanded and we do a little bit of everything in multiple verticals. My past background, heavy into consumer electronics at retail. I was in a past life a CBA certified and Crestron certified systems designer. And in an old life, we worked with my old employer doing big systems, whether it's a single theater room or whole home systems for high net worth individuals. Today, as a distributor's rep, I spend most of my time dealing with commercial industrial dealers, but I still have a few residential AV guys on my dealer roster as well. And I have a lot of opinions.
We love that. And Steve, last but not least, but first, before you introduce yourself, I want to shout out to our mutual friend, Joanne from Crestron, who we'll hear from later, for introducing us and getting you on this panel.
Absolutely. Awesome. Yeah, thanks. My name is Steve Smith. I'm the Solutions Engineering Manager for a company called Bravus. We operate in the home experience design category. Got about 12 locations coast to coast and worked in about 45 states and 4 countries last year. So we kind of get around a little bit and play in the space. Really looking forward to the conversation today.
Nice, us too. We should have one more panelist joining us, but if she's having some technical difficulties, so we shall see if she joins. We'll loop her in shortly. So let's start with the basics. What are some of the primary challenges that you've encountered when you're taking over a DIY AV install, and how do you address those issues during the upgrade process?
Sure. So I can go ahead and take it away. I think the biggest thing that people will run into is they'll run into, let's say they want to upgrade into their system. They really want a full smart home system, and they've already purchased some DIY smart home accessories. The first question you need to be thinking is like, will this be compatible with my Control 4 or Savant or Crestron system? If the answer is like a Ring, the odds are yes, it could potentially work. So it really is defining where the DIY user currently is. If they have a few accessories, it's easy to replace. If they have a full built out DIY smart home, it might be a little bit more difficult to bring every product in and make it compatible with the new upgraded smart home system. So I think compatibility is going to be the first thing that people come to mind and think about.
Yeah, it's
absolutely nailed it.
It's always that is a great answer. It's always tricky because people make an investment in technology, both financially and also with time, and they've spent time putting these things together and doing some research and wanting to make sure they've gotten what they need. I think the biggest question, along with what can we keep, is what were they looking for it to do? I mean, why are they transitioning from some bits and bobs they picked up on Amazon or at a big box store and saying, hey, we need to get a little more extensive? And if you can kind of clarify what experience the client's looking to have and what needs they need to have met, you can sort of start triaging through what's there, what's still going to be functional for them, and what they might need to upgrade and move on to.
For sure. They're amongst the kind of people who are doing whole home smart systems and doing whole home AV automation. There's a very specific kind of enthusiast, typically an engineer, very wealthy engineer, but he's a keener, he's a gearhead, he's an early adopter, very different from the kind of high net worth individual that says, this is what I want, make it so, and grabs his check.
Exactly.
And it didn't come up as often as you might think back in the day, but we had 3 stock answers if somebody wanted us to integrate existing DIY hardware into their new system. The short version was no. The longer answer was absolutely not. And the third fallback was, okay, fine, but we're on the clock for this because we got to do our homework, we have to do our research, and if we tell you that the result will be unsatisfactory, you have to believe us, and we'll even show you why this is going to be unsatisfactory.
Do you encounter a lot of resistance with that?
Honestly, our fees and our design consulting retainer was a bigger filter than that. We repeatedly raised our design consultation retainer because the kind of clients we wanted didn't even blink at the dollars. And, it was an effective filter. If somebody is going to balk at a couple $1,000s, they are going to be incredibly difficult for $50,000 or more. And let's just see, not have these problems before they begin and deal with the kind of people we can deal with.
Right.
People who trust our authority and trust our expertise.
You mentioned a little bit about upgrading existing components. So how do you determine the right balance between upgrading things and also recommending just a complete redesign?
So it goes into Steve's point and what Steve was saying. It's like, find out what the client is really trying to get out of the device. If, for example, we talk about a front door station, so they could either be trying to see if someone's coming to their front door. They could see to watch packages. They want to have video recording clips. But let's say that there's a limit of what the Ring doorbell can do. So the client actually wants to be able to operate their front gate, open and close it, as well as see who's at their front gate. That's when you determine that the Ring is no longer the best product for the consumer and that they needed an upgraded one, something like a 2N that can support what their wants and needs are.
Exactly. I think that's clutch. And, also, hello, Chris, we haven't met, but our companies have. I know your history and your lineage. You guys do great work. So it's really, it's awesome to have you here. Lee, we are fellow Canadians, so I'm going to get you into the club also. I think you're spot on. It's really the biggest reason that we are going to, I don't want to use the word win, but influence a decision to replace something or upgrade something or hold on to it is centered around what the function is, what the experience is, and if that has an inherent value, right? So people, I think, immediately go to, oh, well, this costs this costs that. And they don't factor in ease of use, reliability, full function, whether or not they can explain to their father-in-law, who's watching the kids while they take their first vacation in 9 months, how to open the gate, talk to people, turn the TV on, right? So you really, I think what we do as whole system integrators and people who are really trying to provide that kind of luxury experience is make sure that things work smoothly together, they're simple to operate, and that drives a lot more selection than the dollar value at the end of the day, because you really paint that value across all those areas.
I absolutely agree with that. And it boils down to the initial needs assessment during the initial intake when you're interviewing the client and getting a handle on what they really want, because we all know that what the client says they want and what it turns out they actually need could be two completely different things. And they may simply not be aware that you have solutions to problems that they weren't even aware there were solutions for.
Right.
And that comes out during the initial intake assessment as you get to know who they are and what they really want to accomplish. And budget is always a factor, but my grandfather was fond of saying about home renovations that you can fix anything if you're handy with money. And it's nice to have an unlimited budget, but most of us have limitations, and even high net worth individuals have limitations. $500,000 might be fine, but $2 million on their system is just a bridge too far. Right. Unless their friend got a similar system and comes to you and says, yeah, you did the system for my buddy. What do you have that's better?
Mm-hmm.
So how do you educate these DIY clients about the benefits of upgrading to higher quality equipment without overwhelming them with technical jargon?
So,
okay,
no, yeah, please do. So I was going to say again, it's really learning about your client, right, and what their value is. I think again, the immediate jump is, hey, you have this wireless speaker that plugs into the wall that will remain nameless, and the reality is, if it sounds good enough for them and it works the way they want, trying to argue about volume output or treble response or any of those items is kind of folly, because they've sort of decided this is all I need. Now, to Chris's point earlier, if you look at it and go, but you don't want it sitting on the shelf, you don't want it plugged in, you want it to be, do X, Y, Z, then you're just educating them on the other options out there and how that could be a better fit for them, as opposed to getting into kind of a spec argument about why your stuff is better. You just want to explain why this is going to be a better fit and experience for them.
And I think it's going to depend very much on the product category. If somebody has audiophile quality, hi-fi gear that they want controlled in their listening room, that's easier to accomplish. But like video products, everybody knows video is a poor store of value, and the TV you bought 5 years ago does not compete to the TV that you can get for a third of the price today. And we really don't want to be touching these old TVs. And if we don't know the brand and we're not familiar with their control protocols, does it have a discrete power on, power off command, or is it an on off toggle? These things cause complications down the road that negatively impact the user experience. And when you can get much, much nicer video displays today compared to what you had 10 years ago, why wouldn't you upgrade? The one story that comes to mind is we had a recurring client, a husband and wife who were the drywall kings of Edmonton. They were magnates in the drywall business. They owned a drywall factory. And the wife, especially, despite the fact that she was a septuagenarian, she was an avid technophile. She wanted the newest every year or two. We were constantly upgrading the projector in her cinema room. As soon as there was a better one, she wanted it. A bigger screen, she wanted that. A new flat panel on her bedroom wall, she wanted that. And the reason I'm bringing this up is, despite the fact that we had done her system and we're constantly upgrading it per her whim, for whatever reason, they built their house. Every single interior wall was double frame construction with a minimum of 3.75 inch layers of drywall in every room in the house, walls and ceilings. The whole house is completely soundproofed like a CIA black site, so that you couldn't hear anything from one room to another. And every time we had to run new lines, the installers would all just roll their eyes and shake their heads, but they were getting paid by the hour. So however long it took to drill holes in these ridiculous fortress walls was however long it was going to take to drill the holes and burn out. We had to always bring extra batteries for your drill because you're going to be burning out batteries drilling through their walls. It was ridiculous. But you got to do what you got to do, and they didn't care. They were paying by the hour. She wanted what she wanted when she wanted it, and price was no issue. I got a little sidetracked there, but it's one of my favorite stories.
Nice.
No, it's a good story.
I don't find that I have too many people coming with a already elaborate DIY home system. I'll find that most people, if they do have some DIY hardware in their home, it might be some Philips Hue, might be a Ring doorbell, might be an Ecobee thermostat. So those are the ones that just have the accessories. The people that I think you're talking about are the DIYers, like me, right? So I started my smart home DIY. I was tinkering. I bought things. I made things that didn't necessarily work together. And I was a tinker, right? I was passionate about the smart home, and I was trying to find out which way I could go in my smart home and find out the full potential behind it. I don't think that most consumers are like that. I think they just want a front doorbell camera so they can see who's at their door. I think they want to just control their thermostat and set up an automation and scene so they can control it when they're out of the home. I don't find that many people have an elaborate smart home system and then they want to switch to something like a Savant or a control system. I think people that want these elaborate control systems have the money to afford it. They want the luxury of someone being able to provide that service, but I don't think they have the technical expertise to go ahead and perform any of that operation. And I think they're completely content doing it that way.
I think there's always a disconnect between the enthusiasts and the family members. One of my personal friends is an engineer. He owns a fire safety company, does, fire suppression, fire control systems in commercial buildings. And his house is a mad scientist lab of smart home stuff. He was avidly showing off to me all of his color changing light bulbs in all the different rooms on the main floor. And he was controlling them from 4 separate apps because there's 4 different brands of bulbs. So he's got to swipe from one app to the next to control this room, that room, that thing. And his wife and kids will not touch this stuff. They're just using the regular dumb light switches. They don't care about the color. They don't care about the control. They're actually terrified of his creations.
There's another.
Yeah, go ahead, Steve.
Oh, no, there's this other layer that I sort of consider DIY that I might be mistaken on this, but You know, again, to your point, Chris, I don't also see a lot of, hey, we've done this extensive set. What I run into a fair amount, and what our sales team will see, are clients who have said, hey, I got this deal from AT&T and it does security and there's some cameras and they do my thermostat already, and I want to keep all of that. And it's really about, hey, that's pretty feature limiting with all the other things you're doing. Or they'll say, I really like this surround setup I had at my old house. I want to bring that over. And you have to kind of explain that, Atmos is a thing, et cetera. So I think beyond even just the IoT side, there's this element of segmented, siloed systems that consumers tend to land in when they go out and find a single solution, right? So, if someone comes to Eagle Century, or if they come to us and they say, I want a security system. Well, we're not going to sell them something that means they can't use it in a full-blown system later. But when you call, a mom and pop shop or a national single provider, they tend to lock them into a world that can't integrate. So all of a sudden, even if you do a full-blown automation system after that, when you arm the alarm, nothing happens because the rest of your system doesn't know. So I kind of put that DIY category in with those as well, just because you really want to be careful about the decisions you make, in that everything's gonna, you kind of need your technology Sherpa to be around and say, hey, great, we can just do this part, but this will let you do this later.
That's a great quote, technology Sherpa. I love that.
I love that. No, I'm totally stealing that. That's fantastic.
We'll have to make sure the social team grabs that one.
I mean, essentially, that's what you are. That's what the integrator is. It's the technology Sherpa for the consumer who, I don't know anything about Cat 6 and what this networking equipment is. I bet your average consumer cannot identify your modem versus your router. And they're totally okay with that. And that's why, Steve, you said it best. I mean, the integrator needs to be the technology Sherpa for our clients. And that's what the role is as the integrator.
Yeah.
So what are some of the most significant advancements in technology that make upgrading a DIY system worth the investment today? Like if somebody was asking you, what's better that why do I need to upgrade this? What would you say?
Just the advancement, the seamlessness, the complete control via one app. I think Savant started it off 5 to 10 years ago. They made the smart home sexy. They made it appealing. They made beautiful menus and layouts where you can create scenes and add lights and automation to your home and really bring it alive. And that's what the rest of the market is following upon. So really, we've seen just a tremendous growth of smart home as a whole in the last 10 years, let alone the luxury industry as well as the DIY industry. So it's really been a massive change from the smart home world that we all knew 25 years ago.
I think anybody who's puttering around with off-the-shelf DIY from Home Depot is in for a shock when they walk into a integrated showroom and see what a true integration looks like, what a good user experience looks like, what a good user interface looks like. And I could rant for an hour, as I'm sure you all can, about bad user interfaces and bad design decisions. And when a guy has 5 different silos operating in his house that sort of talk to each other, but not really, you can actually blow their minds when you can show them what is truly possible with a simple, direct, and elegant solution. Because nothing
Yeah.
that comes off the shelf actually works well with each other generally. It's a crapshoot. I've got 3 different warring ecosystems in my house because I'm a masochist right now, and I do not have the time to devote to make sure any one of them works correctly. So, like an animal, I am currently running my AV system in the main room with 3 different remote controls because my family just is had it with me. So we're just going to the old school approach until I can finally get things working, if that ever happens. And yet there's products in my house, like the perfect example is the dongle from Chamberlain, the garage door company that remote controls my garage door. I can control it from the app on my phone, and I can theoretically do it from the Apple HomePod or Google Home, but not really. The number of steps I have to hop through with any of those off-the-shelf systems to make my garage door open and close or report back to me on its status is more trouble than it's worth. And I can't deal with it. I don't expect a normal person can deal with that either.
Right. I think though, you guys have both hit on some of those key points. And the reality is the number one thing we provide if we're doing our job well is time, right? You can't make more of it. You can't get any of it back. And when you don't have to be present to operate the lights in your house because the rest of your family doesn't have the 4 apps you're using, when you don't have to be there to receive a package because you can go, oh, that's FedEx, we're good. Open this door, don't open that one, we're good to go. When you can just have single actions that are easy to use, accomplish tasks around your home, like, opening blinds, and you're not all of a sudden having to walk around and open 9 blinds worth of windows, which, there was a long time in my life where I thought that just sounds lazy. But if you've got 8, 12, 14 windows on the first floor and they're not motorized, I almost guarantee half of those just stay in one state all day, because who's got the time to go around and deal with it? And so I think we're really just making things easy to use, saving time, giving that kind of more seamless experience. And that really is the biggest argument to move away from these small siloed systems that are trickier to use. Because otherwise, like, let's be honest, a lot of this stuff looks and sounds well on its own. There's nothing wrong with, you know, random light bulb number 1 from Amazon on its own. It works fine. Like, once you get to the app and do what you do, it changes colors. You're like, oh, that's great. It was $30. But when you try to do a house of that, combined with audio, combined with security, combined with, my mother-in-law is watching the kids this weekend, you really start getting into trouble. And that's really, I think, the solution we're providing.
One of my favorite axioms when talking with dealers is that luxuries become necessities over time. Who here still has crank doors and manual locks in their car?
Right.
Nobody.
Exactly.
Power doors and windows were only on luxury cars in the 1980s, and now they're in base model cheap cars. And once you have them, there's no going back. I mean, when I got my new car a couple of years ago, I wanted the midline trim kit, and 2022 was a stupid time to buy a car because of the supply chain crises. And the sales manager at the dealership said, well, I only have the sport model with the turbo and the leather, but you can take that for a test drive and see what you think, Lee. And I'm like, okay, well, first of all, go to hell, Curtis, because I know exactly what you're trying to do to me. I'm going to play along, but I'm not going to like it. But the fact is that once I got out on the highway past the dealership and the turbo kicked in, I knew I was not giving that car back. So he won, and I went along with it. When you show people true potential and what they can really get, that's when their budget becomes a little more flexible and they figure out how to make it work.
And I can give a shout out here too. So as I mentioned earlier in the show, I really was a DIYer. I was tinkering around in my own smart home before I ever got a job working in professional AV. And in the note of what we're talking about, if someone really wants to open their eyes to the world that they have no idea of what's out there from a DIY perspective, go to Cedia, right? You're going to get your eyes blown away about this C-seed screen that comes out of a box and the 100 and whatever foot projector screen. I mean, it's just insane. So if someone really wants to dive deep into the world that we're talking about of professional smart homes, go to Cedia. I mean, it's an experience unlike anything else you could describe.
We love Cedia. So on a similar note to the last question, how are you seamlessly integrating these newer technologies like voice control, et cetera, into the existing setups? Do you have any tips and tricks to share?
So Eagle Sentry is just starting to get into voice. So we recently started a partnership with Josh. So prior to that, we weren't doing a whole lot in terms of voice. We were mainly doing kind of smart home, so having that physical element, so a standard Lutron light switch, as well as the iPhone app where you can control the lights. And we really hadn't focused on that third aspect, that voice. But from my perspective, and I have no sort of personal ties with Josh, I think Josh is just an absolutely incredible company out of Denver. I think they're not only leading the voice challenge and charge, integrating that with AI, but they're also giving our standard control systems, the Control 4 Crestron Savant, they're giving them really a run for their money. So I think there's incredible things going on at Josh. And, I think everyone should keep their eye out for what Josh does over the next 5 to 10 years, because I think people might be really surprised by how far they really do come in this industry.
They're absolutely. I mean, Tim and Alex have been innovators from the jump, which is great. I think that the biggest thing when you're innovating voice control is having a really legitimate backup plan. Because I will tell you, I have looked at, checked out, installed the majority of the options out there, and very few things work 100% of the time. Voice is a really tricky set. Um, I'm a big proponent of kind of a layered approach, right? So you have something to control them all. So whether that's you put if we're talking about Josh, if you put Crestron or Control 4 underneath that, so you've got another option. Josh's control platform is really, really solid as well. By the way, I'm not talking badly, but just having things really nailed on the way in. I think the biggest mistake people run into, and one of the biggest turnoffs with voice control, is they go, "Hey, I got a Google Puck thing, and Sonos doesn't always play the song I want it to play." And it's like, okay, but Sonos doesn't always play the song you want it to play on its own. So let's not let's not blame an entire segment of technology on that, right? Like, you need to make sure those subsystems are really rock solid, installed correctly, performing correctly before you kind of try to put a layer of voice on top of it.
For sure. If the original layer isn't functioning properly, you can't add another layer and expect it to be better, right? That
It sort of
doesn't make
applies
sense.
it applies to everything we do, actually, to be fair, not just voice, but yeah.
Absolutely.
Occam's razor is always there, that the simple solution is always the best solution. I mean, that's not really Occam's razor, but you know what I'm saying? Huh? Nice. Yeah, it's one of my favorites, as well as, good judgment comes from experience, and experience comes from bad judgment. My perspective on voice control is, as an end user, I'm late to the party because I'm kind of a caveman, and I was kind of dismissive of voice control. Well, I've never had that before. Why do I need it now? It was my kids who got more and more into voice control. And is it perfect? No. Is it making progress? Yes. Is it better than it was last year? Yes. Is it continuing to improve? Also, yes. So once luxuries become necessities, and once you actually have some functioning voice control, you can't really go back to trying to find your control panel or trying to grab your phone and make sure you've got the right app up, and just being able to say things. I mean, we joke all the time about how dumb the future appears to be, and just it keeps getting dumber, but it's not all bad. There are some true progress, that we are making in technology that does make our lives more convenient and easier.
Absolutely.
So, doing home AV is a little bit different from doing commercial installs, because one of the things you have to deal with is homeowner preferences and how they personally have decorated their house and their aesthetics. So, what are some best practices for balancing homeowner aesthetics and performance with the upgrades that you're doing?
Oh, I got a good one if I could lead this one.
Yeah.
Mhm.
All right, so we do a lot of work from homes that are brand new construction. So a lot of custom homes we work directly with, and a lot of the times we're brought in early and we're working with the designers of the home. And really, the designer wants everything to look perfectly, but they don't understand that they need the equipment to also function properly. So a big thing that we're currently facing is designers want wireless access points to be hidden. They want it in a cabinet. They want it not to be seen. They don't want it on the ceiling. However, everyone on this call knows that that will definitely hurt performance. So we've had to take kind of the hard stance with the designers and basically tell them, like, this needs to be here. There's really no other option. Like, we need this to perform. Otherwise, we will not be able to move forward. So it's making those difficult conversations, because from my experience, the conversation is going to happen regardless. I'd rather have it happen ahead of time,
Mhm.
beforehand, rather than everything is done. We now have to sort of break into drywall. The client's not having good performance in their master bedroom or another important area. And it's really just, like Lee said, having the expertise in your design, knowing that expertise, and you being the expert, the technical Sherpa for your clients. So I think a great example is the wireless access point needs to be where we design it to be. It needs to be functional and it needs to be visible, unfortunately, just because we want everything to be perfect when in terms of your networking.
Yeah, I think that that man, that Wi-Fi deal is a little PTSD. So take a moment to recover from that. The I think the biggest thing you can do when you're dealing with design and aesthetic considerations is get involved early. And I think, Chris, this is what you're talking about, is saying, hey, for the record, we are going to have to put a speaker in this space, or they will want to watch TV somewhere in this house. Let's figure out how that's complementary, right? So, I think, again, it's getting involved early on, and those architects, designers, builder partners that you have, actually, using your eyes and ears and watching what they're doing, listening to what their desired result is, and just kind of figuring out how we're going to make it work. And the closer you are to the beginning of that project, the easier that process is. The more educating you can do, the more options you can kind of show that you can provide, I think really helps that match. The other thing, is if you're on the other end of the scale and you walk into an existing home, or you've got one of these DIY clients, right, that we're talking about, and they say, hey, I'm ready to do something new. And you walk into a house, and when you walk in, you go, this is pretty hyper contemporary. It's really cool. Oh, they've got a lot of mid-century modern in this room. Like, you need to take design cues aesthetically there. You offer, clients like that keypads that look like they fit in. You offer speakers that look like they fit in. You don't sell round speaker grills on a house with square in-ceiling fixtures. I mean, all of that sounds like a really basic consideration. Our industry has had a really hard time understanding that sometimes people have to actually look at our products. So it's just good to listen and look around and kind of see what matches.
And I think it's valuable to treat, if the client has a designer on staff, on retainer, doing the aesthetics of their house, don't just treat the designer as a fellow professional, treat them as a stakeholder in the project. Win them over, seduce them with what you're capable of, because they don't know. They are in their little world, they have their expertise, they know their feng shui or whatever it is. You need to show them the potential of what you can do working around what they want to accomplish. And you have to explain to them in clear terms that, yeah, the drop down motorized lift or the flat panel has to be on this side of the ceiling in the room. The pop-up motorized lift coming out of the credenza for this motorized lift has to be over here. And these are the reasons why, and this is going to enhance the client's user experience and beautify the room. We're not working against you, we're working with you here.
Right. It's funny, mentioning that designer partnership. I think probably the best thing, I think my best experience at Cedia, so we're talking about Cedia earlier as well, was probably 2011. And I had been 5 or 6 times at this point. And we actually, the company I was with, brought 2 interior decorators with us from our market. They were like 2 of the kind of up and coming people we were starting to do a lot of work with. We're like, let's go to this trade show. So I'm walking the floor, and there's like 4 or 5 of our techs, and I'm there, and we go by the KEF booth, and of course they've got like a bright blue blade rotating in the middle of the room, and all of the techs like scurry in to take a look at it. And the decorator looks over, sees what they're looking at, says, that will never go in one of my clients' houses. And I was like, great, let's keep walking. You know what I mean? It was just that that kind of walk through and starting to look through the lens of how people see spaces and what they're looking for is probably, I mean, it's easy to teach someone how to hook things up and how things work. It's really difficult to wrap their head around how to treat an aesthetic properly. So great topic.
How often are you guys working with design professionals?
In mostly every custom project, there's some involvement with a designer of some type. It's not daily, it's not weekly. A lot of it is in the planning phase. It's a lot of it, okay, we'll talk this month, we'll do some work, we'll catch up in 2 months, make sure everything is still on track. I think it's just maintaining that communication and relationship. It's not daily communication, but designers are involved in most of the custom home projects that we're dealing with.
For sure.
So
I got no
we
real
talked.
point here, but I have one short funny story.
Yeah, tell us.
In one massive monster home we did, the wife was the head designer. She was a great aesthetic sense, and money was quite literally no object for her. And while we were doing some of the trim out in her system, midway through the project, she was on the phone yelling at her plumbing supplier because she had ordered oil washed antiqued bronze fixtures for the bathrooms, and they shipped her oil washed bronze fixtures. That extra adjective cost more money, and she did not get what she was paying for, and she was making their life hell. And I resolved then there listening to her that I was always going to stay on her good side and keep delivering the goods and never ever cause her a problem.
I
Nice.
love that. It does make a difference, though. It's the little things. So we've
Absolutely.
talked about budgeting a little bit. And so, how are you managing expectations during the upgrade process when a client, they have a DIY system that's underperforming and they want to upgrade, but their budget isn't the best. So maybe the whole system isn't at their expectation. How do you manage that scenario?
Um, you know, I think you have hit on probably the most key topic in our industry, and probably in most, which is how do you manage expectations, right? So how do you very clearly communicate what will happen and then execute it? And that's the tough one. I think it's really important uh, to know what it is that you're doing, like what your product set is, what your solution set is, what you like. This is what this will do. I've heard it, I've seen it, I've used it. And then understand that there is a point at which, especially when there is any kind of defined budget involved, there's a point at which you have to say, actually, no, not that. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's okay. Like, I think someone kind of said earlier in a version of, hey, with our knowledge and your money, we can do anything. Um, but it's really, I think, important to let people know what their actual usage experience is going to be, and then help them understand why certain things don't matter. I think one of the biggest cases of this is when you're dealing with Wi-Fi networking. People go, oh, Wi-Fi 7 is coming out, I have to have it. And you're like, okay, do you own one of these 3 products? No. Okay, well, you won't be using that tomorrow anyway. But also explaining to folks what actual usage is, how density works, that you're not going to run a speed test from every square foot of your home and hit the maximum performance, and just letting people know what those things mean. I remember tearing out back, this will take it back a while. I remember uninstalling 720p displays in people's houses because they wanted a 1080i because that was better. And really trying to figure out how you explain, nope, that's only 540 at a time. It's actually worse, but just nope, that number's higher. So I think you've got to be an educator. You've got to really set clear examples of what their experience is going to be, and then you've got to be able to deliver. If that's a fair way to answer that.
Totally agree. Like crystal clear communication from start to finish, right from the initial needs assessment. When you get to the scope of work document, nobody likes going through the scope of work document because it's boring, but you have to clearly express this is what we can do in this room, this is what we can do in that room, this is what we can do in the other room, this is what we can achieve. Are you okay with this? Sign here. And everything seems to always come down to a good, fast, cheap project management triangle. You can pick 2, but you can't have all 3.
See that, Lee, that's tremendously funny too, because I think of our industry as like a 3 parts to a project. There's the sales kind of initial, there's the performance of the installation, and then there's the last 33%, the service side. In my opinion, and keep in mind, I don't do this from a sales perspective, but to me, it seems like the first 33%, the discussing of the prices and which TV you want to buy, is actually the easiest part of the 3. Then it gets a little bit more complicated when you're installing things. Things don't necessarily work as planned. You got to start getting creative, functioning. And then the last is the service part. Like when things don't work for, what seems like no rational reason, my TV just randomly turned off. It's like the AV ghosts. Like those are the things that are difficult to recreate, or really match exactly the scenario that happened for the client. I see discussing whether you want to buy the good, better, best speakers. I mean, they're going to come to a decision. I think when we have, more troublesome service problems, I think is really when the smart home system is actually non-beneficial for the clients, right? Now I just wanted to turn my lights on and off using my phone, and now my lights aren't working in my entire house and I have company coming over. Is literally a 911. Like, this is why some people may have hesitancies about smart homes, and that's what we're trying to prevent. All of us on this call, we're wanting to have people enjoy their smart homes, provide them reliable as well as seamless experiences. And I think really the first part of defining the products and purchasing them, defining the price is the easy part, but truly providing top functionality is what I would consider the more difficult part of our career, job, industry, everything.
And Murphy's Law, as it applies to this field, is that if you're going to get a panicked phone call from the client, it's going to be an hour before kickoff for the Super Bowl watch party.
Or on a Friday night, anytime where it's inconvenient for you.
Exactly.
Totally.
So are you guys ready for some audience questions?
Yeah.
Sure. Bring it on.
What do you think is the most difficult part to retrofit a DIY installation? Is it the lighting, shading, climate control, video, audio?
Wiring, probably any sort of retrofit where wires have to be run.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's definitely knowing what to expect when you open something up is the crutch. I mean, most of our industry, obviously, it's easy to look at us and go, "Oh, you guys do TVs and speakers and remotes," and it's like there's a lot of construction and framing knowledge, and oh, this is how houses were being built around here 15 years ago. I think we could do this. It's really that retrofit situation is really an art form.
Lee, do you have anything you want to add?
I had a point to make, and then I get distracted by the delivery at the front door. I'm trying to remember what it was again. I'd have to say the most difficult thing. God, gotta come back to this. Sorry.
Sure. Let's move on to the next question. What advice do you have for installers who are dealing with DIY setups that lack proper ventilation or have equipment overheating issues?
It might be time to think about a different solution. If there's problems with the existing solution and that the functionality is not there, whether it's overheating or something like that, I mean, you could potentially see if you could cool it down. But if there's significant flaws with the original deployment, there might not be too much you can fix, and it might be time to start thinking about other options.
Absolutely. You can put a Band-Aid on a problem and keep reapplying a fresh Band-Aid over and over again, but that doesn't solve the root problem. Drilled into me in my past was the troubleshooting mantra: diagnose, analyze, repair, test, prevent. And I can do that in my sleep. I am a troubleshooting king, and that still comes in handy today. But the key part of the troubleshooting mantra is prevent. Once you've fixed the problem, once you've isolated the problem, you've identified the problem, you got a solution, make sure it never happens again. And that could well be ripping something out and doing something completely different, because past is prologue, and this has happened before. It's going to happen again unless you do something radical and do something completely different. And as Homer Simpson was fond of saying, don't just keep half-assing things, whole ass one thing.
Yeah, I think you guys hit the nail on the head, and it comes down to the fact that you can't beat physics, right? If a cabinet has no airflow, whatever you put in there will eventually overheat. If a wall is lath and plaster and has metal mesh on it, I don't care how strong the access point is, you will not have Wi-Fi on the other side of it. So there's an element of just being able to find root cause to fix those. Having said that, if you have a cabinet that has no ventilation in it, there's a lot of great products that will let you cut a hole in the side and put a grill on it and have a fan that's thermostatic controlled and possibly solve that for you. But you have to sort out why these problems are happening before you just start throwing things at it to fix it.
Remember what I was going to say before, and is now applicable to this particular topic.
Perfect.
One of my favorite aphorisms that I annoy everybody around me with is that Pablo Picasso said that everything in life is easy or impossible. You either can do it or you can't. And my corollary to that is the difference between easy and impossible is having the right tool for the job. You might only need this tool for this one particular application, but it could well be that nothing else is going to get it done the way this one tool is. Full stop.
Fair. Next audience question, what role do acoustics play in DIY audio setups? So how can you improve the sound quality when you're in a challenging environment?
Oh boy, it plays all the roles. I will, again, you can't beat physics. You just can't. So when you are, again, looking at a room, whether it is, hey, it's too echoey in here. If my dog who just woke up barks in a second, you will get a full view of what an echoey room sounds like. Sorry. Is it too echoey in here? There's no bass in here. I added a subwoofer and there's still no bass. Well, if the dimensions of the room are such that it's canceling that out, you can't overpower it. So acoustic treatment is huge. It is the easiest way to make something that does not sound good sound better once you've hit any level of performance at all. There's a lot of products on the market that can do that either from a DIY or a professional standpoint. The biggest thing you can do is make sure you triple verify that what something's going to do is valid. And chances are, if it seems like it's significantly cheaper than everyone else's solutions, it's not going to work. Because again, this is just science. There's no magical way to create these boxes.
Physics is everything. I mean, it all comes down to something that's non-subjective, like how you place your speakers and in what environment they are in. There is going to be a response, whether you like it or not, and then you can adjust from there, which is the good part.
My experience was always that people who care about sound quality are a very niche segment of the marketplace. It's typically the audiophile fanboys who actually put effort into tuning their listening room. For most people, good enough is good enough, and most people are happy with a $50 Bluetooth speaker or an off-the-shelf surround sound system, and anything more than that is just lost on them. Yes, they know it's good, but they are not an enthusiast the way that industry professionals or audiophile nerds are. We had the most trouble generally with audio issues and sound quality in boardroom settings, for example, or teleconferencing setups. That usually is where we were necessitating to have to do acoustic treatment solutions as opposed to more on the residential side where, again, perspective, good enough is good enough. And I'm just reminded it's not audio, but about the time that I sold a clearance projector to one of my buddies that he put into his games room and then had a Grey Cup watch party. And this was an old DLP Sharp projector that was, I think, 476i. And on 100-inch screen, the Grey Cup on just regular standard definition satellite looked fantastic. And my friend's dad was like, "Oh, this is that high def. Oh, that's amazing." Okay. I just smiled and nodded. He's happy, so I'm happy.
You mentioned video conferencing, and I will say for all of the negatives to that period of time where we couldn't leave the house for 2 years, I think that did more for acoustic design awareness when everyone had to be on Zoom, and it was your laptop is open and you're listening to a room echo around, and all of a sudden you slowly started watching people with like slat panels behind their computer or however, and I think people started to realize, oh, it's a lot better when I put that up. So it's kind of an interesting spin.
And it's funny you mentioned that, and it's slightly off topic, but right at the beginning of COVID, when everybody was working from home, we saw a huge run from our B2B dealers who were vending headsets and earbuds to their business clients, and they would take whatever they could get. They would $14 dealer cost earbuds. Yeah, well, do they have a mic on the cord? We'll take them. And then 6 months later, there was another go round of the end user business clients coming back to my B2B dealers and saying, "Yeah, these kind of suck. What do you have that's better?" And that's like, I'm wearing Blue Parrot, which is one of my brands and is one of the industry leaders in noise canceling, AWS, Bluetooth headsets for office and commercial use. And the people who were buying really crummy headsets upgraded and bought much nicer headsets because they understood that there is a difference between the bottom of the barrel and stuff that's actually good.
Next question. How do you train staff to effectively and thoroughly troubleshoot? AKA, how do we differentiate between I fixed it and I understand what went wrong?
So I spent a lot of time in the field and did a lot of this. I think the first thing I do when I'm talking to a technician about troubleshooting is ask them whether or not in kindergarten they sang the hip bone, thigh bone song. You know, hip bone connects to the thigh bone, connects to the. Because if they didn't, so if they're of a certain age where that song was no longer popular, you have a lot more to teach and train. I think the biggest thing with troubleshooting in general is you understand signal flow. And as soon as you understand signal flow, Apple TV, HDMI cord, television, you start at the beginning. Verify, verify, verify. The second part of solving a problem is once you have solved it. So if you are, whether you're in a full integrated system or in a DIY system in a house, and you say, okay, hey, my porch lights aren't turning off and on the way we want. And you do a bunch of work and you make a couple changes to the Wi-Fi network, or you put another access point in and you go, oh, that's fixed now. The next step you do before you call that done is test everything else. And I mean everything, because if you haven't checked it, you don't know that it works. You don't know if you didn't cause another problem. Every time, test everything.
Every solution has two problems, full stop. And this applies to everything in life.
And to be honest, I'm still working out the answer to this question. Like, troubleshooting is a very difficult part. Even your most experienced technicians who have had 10 plus years doing this, they don't always get it right. They can make that wrong diagnosis. You know, they can miss things. And I think it's providing technicians with enough time to properly and thoroughly do the job. If you're continually rushing someone from next job to next job, you're not going to have things tested properly the way they should be, and they're going to miss things, and you're going to have a go back cause because of that. So really, it's about being thorough. I like what you said, really diving down from each point of the process and, you know, diagnosing, is this the problem? Okay, this works. Okay, next step. And really making a process out of it, I think, is super important. And having a best practice item like checklist, we're going to check for these things. If, you know, and I think as well, experience. If you have noticed that, you know, recently on Apple TV OS 17, all Pro Control remotes had this weird little jiggle thing. So as at first when we heard about this was so weird. But after the 10th caller of this person happening, it's like, I know exactly what's going on. I know exactly how we're going to fix this. I know exactly what caused this. So now we can call it done.
Mm-hmm. I was going to say that my work experience was beneficial because I had the good fortune to work for a genius polymath who was a type A personality and an unrelenting perfectionist. He drilled us like the Marine Corps from onboarding through the rest of our careers, and good enough is just good enough. Failure is not an option, and we had to be masters of everything. And even as hired as a sales designer, I was expected to strap on a tool belt and be wire monkey third class and learn from the senior installers on the job site so that my designs would be better. And my designs had to be run by my senior installer who had questions for me. And if I could not answer any of his questions to his satisfaction, the discussion was over and he would not entertain my design until I could answer his questions satisfactorily. And that sharpened my game. You know, iron sharpens iron, one man sharpens another, and you have to be right. And if you have a problem, you have to solve the problem. And my bosses, he had a lot of aphorisms like I do, but one of his favorite was RTFM. And the first thing he would ask us if we were having a problem in the field was, did you RTFM? Did you read the manual? Expletive deleted. And oh
I
no,
believe it's
well, do it
read
and
the
call me.
furnished materials is what that
Yes,
stands
yes.
for. Right?
And I tell this story all the time. He had expressed frustration with the latest crop of people he had hired who had certifications that didn't actually translate to real world capabilities. And he just frustratedly said, you know what? I don't care about Cisco or Microsoft or Crestron. I don't care what's on the resume. I'm going to lock them in the showroom with a boxed IKEA bookshelf and a stopwatch. And I want to see if they can follow simple effing instructions. in a short amount of time. That's all I care about. If they can do that, I can train them everything else they need to know.
So we have time for one more question. How do you handle scaling up a DIY AV system to accommodate larger homes or multi-zone audio and video?
Well, let's hope they don't have multi-zone audio or video, so we can just start from scratch and hope they have the cabling infrastructure to make it happen. Ideal, right?
Well,
Wishful thinking.
one of my old other bosses at another job used to say to clients, "Get your wallet out," because that's what this is going to take. Flippant, but effective.
I think there's two things left after that. One is, again, establish what level of performance they need, what do they actually need to do. Two is, don't fall into the trap of saying, oh, we'll use half of that and half of this. Oh, it's okay. The bedrooms are just going to use these speakers, and then we'll do something different in the living room. You want to have a consistent operating platform, consistent interface, consistent capabilities across an entire system. So I think the biggest people run into is that fallacy of sunk cost, where they go, well, I already bought 6 Sonos speakers. I don't want that in the rest of my house, but I'm going to use these over here. And as soon as they do that, you can just set a timer until they get that call where they go, Jimmy was listening to this in the basement, and then when he went to his bedroom, he couldn't listen to it anymore, and it couldn't get started over, and it just always leads to problems. So whatever system you're replacing or upgrading, if it is not the same, it doesn't come along.
Mm-hmm.
I lied. I'm actually going to ask one more question. How can you improve the user experience when you're designing custom control interfaces for upgraded DIY systems? Especially like Lee, you were talking about this earlier. There's typically one person that knows all the things and knows what to do, and then the rest of the house is like, I don't know how to operate anything.
The key is standardization, and custom should only appear custom to the client. It should look like this is their whole world and you did this just for them. But you've got your standards, you've got your best practices, you have your programmers have their templates, and with except for maybe some slight cosmetic changes like color changes, the interface should be pretty much the same from job to job, from client to client, so that you can, if you have to send an installer, a troubleshooter, and roll a truck to go look at the system in person, they should know exactly what they're looking at without any weird surprises or any strange, hinky, sideways things that aren't on any of your other projects. Simple and direct solves a lot of problems right there.
Yep. There is a reason that these are really highly adopted all over the planet. They all look the same. They all work the same. Anyone who picks one up basically knows how to use it. I think, Lee, your points are spot on. I'll add to that and say, if one person in the system, or if there's a group of people who say, oh, I want to be able to triple tap this button to go into danger mode or whatever, I can usually be talked into something like that in a very specific case. But the key to usability is that you can show somebody else how to use something, right? The babysitter test, someone walks into your house, if in 5 minutes you can't show them how to use things, you've got a UI problem. So I think just, you don't do anything that is hidden, weird, requires a ton of training, so that when you show someone how to use it and it's intuitive, it's repeatable.
One of my hot button topics is designers who design products that they never intend to use themselves and don't actually think about the users when they design things. And that's abundant in all sorts of examples. As a designer, you have to think, what is a normal person going to do when confronted with this interface? How are they going to act? Nobody is going to want to hit once for this light, hit with this for this other, or anything. It's got to be simple and very obvious and immediately intuitive, or you failed. And you're going to be, getting service calls.
Yeah, I think it's super important to make your smart home accessible for everyone, wives, kids, babysitters. We're drifting off track if we're now creating more dysfunction in the home where the standard light switch doesn't turn on the lights and it's just confusing people. in my opinion, that's not a smart home. That's actually a dumb home. So that's my stance on it. We want to make sure that everyone can use the design features, so it's intuitive, easy, and works every single time. I think that's the goal.
Totally.
Okay, I would love to keep asking you guys more. We have a lot of audience questions still, but we are out of time. Thank you so much for joining me. Lee, let's start with you. If people want to find more about you, they want to connect with you, where can they find you?
I've drastically scaled back my social media for a whole bunch of reasons I'm not going to bore you with, but I am still on LinkedIn. I am still approachable. My contact info is on my employer's website, hitfar.com. You can check us out and see what we're into and see if that's something, if you're a Canadian dealer, we might have something that's going to work for you.
And if you like what Lee had to say, he does have lots of opinions, which is why he's on the rAVe blog squad. So you can check out his work at ravepubs.com. Steve, what about you?
I am findable. You can go to bravus.com for our company website. You could also find me on LinkedIn, just steve.smith at bravus.com. I hope I don't regret saying that out loud, but it's pretty easy to find anyway. Love to hear from you all if you have anything you need to know.
Last but not least, Chris.
Cool. So I really enjoyed the panel today. It was excellent getting to chat with a group of guys and gals that are really passionate about the smart home industry. So I think we had a lot of all good opinions to share today. If you want to find more about me, you can go to chrisorm.com. All my social links are on there. If you're in Las Vegas and you're looking for a high-end smart home, definitely go to Eagles Century. You can't go wrong with Eagles Century. And really, I'm just super passionate about this industry. I have a lot to say about it, so I'm constantly posting my thoughts on the internet. So go ahead and follow me on any of those social media platforms, and we'll see you over there.